I was in Thailand there about 2 months ago, and I was kind of going over, I said, this would be great, now I'll immerse myself in Buddhism, a bit of spirituality, cleanse the chakras and all this stuff. And what I really saw was actually very depressing. There is literally, it's quite poor over there, and there is deep levels of inequality. So you're coming around, you're seeing mothers selling things all day with their children behind them, children selling things, you know, it's hard to see at times. And in the same light, you go over the other side of the town and you literally see golden palaces, because they still have a king there. It's very obvious with their ruling class, and you still see all the Buddhas and all the temples, and they're literally painted in gold. And I said, this is just Ireland, but sunnier. The same type of system where there was that level of control, where the church and the state have operated to literally keep people down in economic equality and within our minds. So listening to what Jane is saying there, and the intricate details, I think, of trying to separate church and state are very important for us as we drive these campaigns forward and make a new Ireland and hopefully a new world. I think with repeal, I mean, it was quite obvious across the globe. We saw people, women in Sydney, in France and Spain, standing shoulder to shoulder with the women in Ireland as we fought for our reproductive rights and the political and economic equality that's been denied to us for generations, and we won. That was a massive feat in itself. Not only did we have to push the state into this position, and Leo said it was a quiet revolution, there was nothing quiet about this. If you were up in Ballybracken and all the rallies I've attended, we were fierce and we were loud and we were dared to be heard, and they did hear us. Eventually himself and his lovely socks and the conies up there, they moved their position, and they did that because of us, because of people power. So I think we need to take that. It was grassroots activism that drove this campaign forward, and not to lose sight of that. I think I was in Berlin having a talk about the fight for repeal of the 8, and I was just actually talking about the history of this country and what's going on, and I probably said it before, but I just remember looking up and seeing like women crying in the room, like, and I was like, oh God, because we're so used to, we've actually just been immersed in it, and we've really forgotten how damaging it was. And if you want to look back, the Magdalene laundries, two of them, the X case, the Y case, Savita, and Lovett, the Belfast rape trial, Weinstein, Me Too, there has been this concentrated effort from the witch trials to rape trials to break women, and they have not succeeded. And we really have them on the back foot. So it's very important that we continue to push and to start challenging these dogmas and the roots of these oppressions. There was a quote from a sign actually at the International Women's Day strike in Spain, and I thought it was fantastic. They took so much away from us that they ended up taking away our fear. And that is exactly what they've done. They really tried to push back on women in so many intricate ways, with our bodies, to sexualizing, demonizing us, to denying our vices in so many levels, and that still we were able to push through and break away without that fear and without their dominance and control continuing. And sometimes I think it can be overwhelming when you look around and you see the scale of sexism and inequality across the world, and how it's woven into these institutions, and often in our interpersonal relationships as well. I think we have to be very careful about what we focus on. Am I going to get sucked into that? Not at all, because Ireland right now, where we're going, we're a beacon of hope in a post-Trump world, when we've seen fascists marching across the world again, when climate change is terrifying. Ireland is one of the most liberal, left-leaning countries in the world, and it's fantastic to be a part of that progression. I think it's very important as well that we start to look at how this has happened, how we stop it from continuing to happen. Because we've seen, look at Trump and look at America, that under this system, that where Roe v. Wade was enshrined within the American system, that abortion rights are being rolled back on there. The same thing is happening in Poland, in France, that women's bodies are contested terrains where politicians will fight or grab over fertility and their right to control us. So I think it's very important we do ask the hard questions that have a little bit more depth, but get to the root of what's going on here, and acknowledge that there is no long march to equality under this system, where you might have an Obama, who I have many an issue with, but he had the lovely face of progression, and at the same time this route, and when he comes out, we see Trump, a sexual assault, a predator, being elected to the office of the free world, as they call it. So these are important questions that we need to be asking and thinking about ourselves. I think it's very important to look at the majority of us. What do we do with our lives? We work. We go into work, and we go in for 8, we go in for 10, we go into 12 hours. We're told what to do, when we can eat, what we wear. And I did bar work for years, and you'd literally be in a bar from here to here for 8 hours, and you do, God. But it's a dreadful system, and in a way it's really used against us, that we spend all our time going into work for someone else. And I want to come back to that later at the end of my talk, but I think it's very important that we look at how we're dominated within that system, that we go into work, not for our own benefit. I don't go to work so that, well I do because I work for profit now, but I didn't, and the majority of us don't go to work so that our neighbours can have homes, technically, or so that there's free childcare, or that we're in a better society overall. We go to work every single day to earn money for a very few minority within society. And I remember I was going to go travelling, and I worked it all out, and I was like, right, I need 10 grand, and that's going to be a year of my life, living on nothing, just a year doing overtime, doing all this. And I remember in one till, in one bar, this was a huge complex I worked in, and they got 10 grand in one night. I was like, you fuckers. But it's just the level of inequality that it is a prison, and it's often used against us. And I think it's important that we look at that unequal relationship, that hierarchy, and how that has moulded itself across society in total. I think it's important that we recognise that International Women's Day has really become synonymous with strikes, with breaking inequality. It has sparked revolutions. We saw here, was it last year? It was strike for repeal. That twice in one day we brought Dublin, the capital of Ireland, to a standstill. It's magnificent. In Spain, across the world, International Women's Day is being marked out as a way to move the country and the world forward in their own areas. And I think we need to focus on, we know the Pope is coming at the end of the year, and again getting back to this whole relationship and this intricate sort of oppression that we do face nearly every day, that the Pope is coming over to have a congregation on the family. I was like, why are an order of celibate men so obsessed with the family and with women and our fertility? And I think it's very important about how we look. The system in itself, the family is moulded by the system. So if we get a policy that denies us childcare, that means, and it is women that take the burden here. And women are the ones that are denied access to go out and to work full-time jobs, that we're often pushed into precarious employment, that we are designed to be the emotional carers within the family institute, or the family unit as it is. And that when we have overarching policies, that women are the ones that bear that brunt. And it's also very important, if you see how the church, we know how and you touched on it, but how the church and the state have colluded to control women's bodies, and that they were really strong. And I always tell people to kind of go watch Downton Abbey or Peaky Blinders, and you see, or The Alienist is really good on Netflix, but you see how rigid the class system was. Not much has changed, but the faces have changed. But that the church and the state have always been obsessed with controlling that family unit. And if they have access into our homes through these overarching economic policies, we lose our political and our economic standing within the world. And that is why all you have to do is look at the Handmaid's Tale and see why controlling the women's fertility, you control the family unit. You determine, look at 1950s America, when we saw that the man was the authoritative man. He went out and worked every day, and the woman was there suffering from depression, silently just doing her duties as a woman. And how that level of control is, you might think it's ease, but now it's not so much that women are a lot more in the workforce, but we are the superhero now. We're the super women. We have to work, yes, and we're going out there and we're breaking glass ceilings, but at the same time, our roles within the home have not shifted that much, because we don't have access to childcare, because we have the threat of poverty knocking on our doors, because we don't have the right to decent, well-paid jobs. So it's a double bind, and it's a serious attack that's happening women every day. And I had a family reunion, and this really sort of encapsulated for me. So I had it last Saturday. So my dad was one of 13, reared in Kildare, a very strong working class family. And we were sitting down the day after my mum, that we were talking about my Aunt Jane, she got pregnant, she was about 18. She had to marry this man eventually, and that man beat her black and blue for 30 years until she was able to get out. Or my great Aunt Sheila, who got pregnant, she was engaged to one guy and got pregnant with another guy. She was sent up to Dublin. Nobody within the family literally knows what happened to the child. That's the effects of the control, that's why they are so obsessed with controlling our fertility, with controlling the family unit, and with attacking it through different tax or economic models. And I think it is very important that in the 21st century in this country, The oppression has weaved itself with nice socks and a smile perhaps, but it's a global tax haven system that is actively attacking all these issues. And it's very important that the fight for reproductive justice is huge and it is massive, and it was a blow to conservatism and the church. But the next fight, the fight for free access, is huge, because I did not campaign every day for them to put a price tag of €300 out there for more women, working class women, to be penalised under this system. I fought for free access, I fought to be safe, and I fought for it to be legal. I'm fighting now, and I hope these movements continue. I'm fighting now for free childcare. I'm fighting now for the right to raise your children without poverty or the threat of it. And you have to see, again, back to my point about how women bear the burden of these cuts so often, is the Labour, Joan Burton, she came in with her lone parent cut, and as a result now, about 56% of lone mothers are in continued deprivation. That means they don't have enough money to put the heating on in the house. It means their children are going to school with shoes. It means they're going to school hungry. That is 56% of lone mothers compared to 24% of the general population. These are sneaky, sneaky attacks, and they've done it for too long. So when I say we break the stigma on repeal and on our fight for abortion access, then we do it now economically and politically. We really find our strength in our voice. Because I think that everything in this world is designed to make us forget or not acknowledge that the power we have. They say that money makes the world go round. It is absolutely not. It is us going to work every day. It is us running the hospitals. It is us driving the buses. It is us emptying the bins. It is us, our labour, is what makes the world go round. And if we stop, everything stops. They know it is very, very well. So that is why there's these consistent undermining attacks. And I think it's very important that we continue to organise, because individually we know we are fierce and we know we are strong, but when we organise, there's a massive potential and a massive power in that, and a confidence that comes from it as well. I was doing an interview there really, and they were asking me how I felt after the repeal movement, you know, and it was a very it was obviously, I think everyone's going to have their story, and I hope more share afterwards about how you feel. But I was listening to Eamon McCann. If you ever get a chance to hear him, he's a brilliant speaker. But he was referring to this revolution that I can't remember who the speaker was, but he was saying that everything felt different. That he was coming in over the bridge, everything felt different. And although structurally everything was still sound, it felt different. And I never really understood it. Now Eamon was referring that back to one of the bus strikers up in Dublin. That she was saying the same thing. She was coming in the bus after they won that strike, that everything felt different, that the Liffey looked different. And I remember on the Sunday after the referendum sitting on my bed, and I had that same feeling. I couldn't place it. Everything just felt different, like. And I kind of realised it was that it had changed. Like, not only did we change the country by repealing the 8th Amendment through consistent campaigning, but the fact how I interact with the world. And you can always speak about your alienation from our labour, and I talked about it earlier, how it's controlled, it's done, we go every day and we work for the bosses. But my labour and the collective strength of everyone in this room and people in Carlow and Kenny and all over the country, we changed the world. We interacted with it, and we brought about positive change. So when we're in control of our work, when we don't have to spend 12 hours working for somebody else for the profits of a few other people, then how amazing could this world be? And it's a very exciting time in Ireland right now. But it's also scary because there's so much up in the air. So I think it's very important that we do always want to try and move in the interest of the vast majority, and our interests are tied up in economic equality, in political equality and reproductive access. And so I will again just reiterate the fact before I do finish up that it is massively important that we continue this all across the South East. I was the founder of the South East Coalition for Repeal, and all across it, the Together for Yes, they're not giving up. They're reforming now as equality and choice networks, and they're continuing to push for these things. And in local campaigns, in Carlow, we've set one up because we need a women's refuge, because there's nothing there, because that just shows you how little, you know, even though there's massive issues with domestic violence and rape culture and all these different issues, that it's never been addressed because there was not enough women from everyday life in these systems. So when we saw how many city councillors were out there, all the men with their love vote, 14 signs, get them out at the next locals next year. Get them out and get radical, progressive women in there. That's what can be done, and that's the decisions that we should be trying to make today, that are discussions that we should be having, coming together, challenging that inequality at its root, at local level, bringing it nationally, going into the homes and the communities of everyone around us and saying, we have the power to change the world, are you with me? So I'll leave it on that.